When I first stepped into a position of leadership, I thought I understood what it meant to lead. I believed leadership was about giving direction, being confident, and making quick decisions. I thought people would follow me because I had a title, a position, and the answers. But over time, I discovered how wrong I was. The hardest lesson I learned about true leadership was that it has nothing to do with being in charge, and everything to do with taking care of the people in your charge. There's a story I often go back to. Early in my career, I worked with a team that was under pressure. Deadlines were tight, morale was low, and mistakes were starting to happen. As the leader, I reacted with frustration. I raised my voice, demanded results, and reminded everyone how important the work was. I thought I was motivating them. But instead, I created fear. I didn't realize it at first, but I had stopped listening. I had become focused on performance instead of people. And when you stop listening, you stop leading. It took one of my team members, quiet, hardworking, and honest, to pull me aside one day and tell me, "We're not afraid of failing. We're afraid of disappointing you." That sentence changed me. It hit me harder than any setback I'd ever faced. Because at that moment, I realized leadership isn't about being the best. It's about bringing out the best in others. True leadership isn't measured by how loud you speak, but by how deeply you listen. It's not about how many people work for you, it's about how many people you're willing to work for. Leadership means being the first to take blame and the last to take credit. It's choosing to stand up when your people fall and standing back when they rise. I learned that people don't follow titles, they follow trust. And trust doesn't come from authority, it comes from consistency. When your words match your actions, when you show up even when it's inconvenient, when you make others feel seen and heard, that's when trust grows. And trust is the foundation of every great team, every strong bond, every lasting success. There were moments when I wanted to quit. Moments when I thought I wasn't good enough to lead. But then I learned another truth: leadership is not about being perfect. It's about being real. People don't expect you to have all the answers. They expect you to care enough to find them together. The hardest part of leadership is not the pressure, the responsibility, or the long hours. The hardest part is choosing others before yourself every single time. It's staying calm when everyone else panics. It's owning mistakes you didn't make because your team needs you to. It's believing in people who don't yet believe in themselves. Leadership is a test of patience and character. You will be misunderstood, criticized, and sometimes doubted. But the moment you make it about serving others instead of proving yourself, that's when you truly lead. Because leadership is not a crown you wear. It's a burden you carry, with pride, with purpose, and with love. So, if you ever find yourself leading others, remember the real test is not how well you perform under pressure, but how well you help others perform under pressure. The measure of a leader is not how high they rise, but how many people they lift along the way. When I first stepped into a position of leadership, I thought I knew exactly what it meant to lead. I had studied leadership principles, observed successful people, and believed that being a leader was about confidence, authority, and control. I assumed leadership meant giving orders that others would follow without question. After all, wasn't that what leaders did? They decided, they directed, and they drove results. But as time went on, I realized how mistaken I was. The hardest lesson I learned about true leadership was that it has very little to do with being in charge, and everything to do with being responsible for the people who are in your charge. Leadership is not a title you hold, it's a responsibility you carry. It's not about the position you earn, but about the people you serve. In the beginning, I led with my voice instead of my example. I thought the louder I spoke, the more I'd be respected. I thought authority came from commanding attention. But soon, I started noticing something unsettling. My team was doing the work, but not with passion. They followed instructions, but there was no spark in their eyes. I started to sense hesitation in their voices and silence in their feedback. And then it hit me. People weren't inspired by me. They were intimidated by me. I had confused fear with respect and control with influence. That was my first hard truth. You can make people obey you, but you can never make them believe in you unless they trust you. I remember one particular project that changed everything for me. It was a high-pressure situation, and the stakes were enormous. Deadlines were closing in, mistakes were happening, and I was determined to hold everything together. I started micromanaging every detail. I checked on everyone's progress constantly, corrected their work, and reminded them how important the task was. I thought I was helping. I thought I was leading. But what I was really doing was suffocating the very people I needed to trust. One day, after another long, intense meeting, one of my quietest team members asked to speak to me privately. I could tell by the look in his eyes that something was wrong. He took a deep breath and said, "We're not afraid of failing. We're afraid of disappointing you." Those words hit me harder than any failure ever could. That single sentence made me realize that I had become the kind of leader who made people cautious instead of courageous. I had unintentionally created a culture of fear instead of a culture of trust. And that's when I understood the second truth about leadership. True leaders don't demand trust, they earn it. They earn it through consistency, integrity, and empathy. They earn it by showing up for their people, not just when things are easy, but when things are falling apart. They earn it by being the first to take the blame and the last to take the credit. That's the essence of real leadership. Over time, I started changing how I led. I began to listen more and talk less. I learned that people open up when they feel heard, not when they're told what to do. I began to ask questions like, "What do you think?" instead of, "Here's what I want." I started to recognize that leadership is not about knowing everything. It's about creating an environment where others feel safe enough to contribute what they know. That shift changed everything. When people feel valued, they don't just work for you, they work with you. They stop seeing the leader as a boss and start seeing them as a partner. True leadership is rooted in humility. It's not about showing people how powerful you are. It's about showing them how powerful they can be. The greatest leaders I've ever met are not the ones who command attention the moment they walk into a room. They're the ones who make everyone else in that room feel they matter. They know that leadership is not a performance, it's a service. The most successful teams are built not by those who shout the loudest, but by those who care the deepest. There were moments in my journey when I doubted myself. Times when I thought maybe I wasn't cut out to lead because I cared too much. I used to think being emotional was a weakness in leadership, but I learned that empathy is the strongest force a leader can possess. It's what turns authority into influence and positions into purpose. People don't remember leaders because they were brilliant strategists or great decision makers. They remember leaders because those leaders made them feel seen, valued, and safe. That's the hardest but most rewarding part of leadership, to put others before yourself, even when it costs you. Leadership is not about how you act when things go right. It's about how you respond when everything goes wrong. It's about staying calm when others panic, offering direction when others are lost, and taking responsibility even when the mistake wasn't yours. It's about creating a sense of security so strong that people dare to take risks, because they know their leader will stand behind them, not above them. I learned that leadership is less about commanding results and more about creating conditions for results to happen naturally. When your people trust you, they'll give you their best, not because they have to, but because they want to. I also learned that leadership is not a one-time act, it's a daily choice. Every day you have to choose patience over pride, empathy over ego, and service over self-interest. Every day, you decide whether to inspire or to intimidate, to guide or to control, to listen or to dismiss. The hardest part is that it never gets easy. Leadership constantly tests your character. It will expose your insecurities, challenge your beliefs, and demand your humility. But that's what makes it so meaningful, because in serving others, you end up discovering the best version of yourself. There was another moment that tested everything I believed about leadership. Our team had failed to meet a critical goal, and the disappointment was heavy. Everyone looked defeated. It would have been easy for me to point fingers or shift the blame, but I didn't. Instead, I told them, this was my responsibility. I failed you. I watched as the energy in the room changed. People lifted their heads. They started offering solutions, not excuses. That's when I realized something powerful. People don't follow leaders because they're perfect. They follow them because they're honest. When you admit your flaws, you give others permission to be human too. The longer I led, the more I realized that leadership is not a ladder you climb. It's a circle you complete. The goal is not to rise above others, but to lift them with you. Every decision you make, every word you speak, every action you take has the power to either build trust or break it. The question is not, how do I get people to follow me? The question is, how do I make them believe in themselves? That's what separates leaders from bosses, mentors from managers, and servants from rulers. True leadership is not glamorous. It's messy, uncomfortable, and often thankless. It means taking the hard path when the easy one looks tempting. It means showing up when nobody else will. It means believing in people even when they've stopped believing in themselves. But it's also beautiful because when you see someone grow under your guidance, when you see them find their voice, their strength, their confidence, that's when you know your leadership mattered. So yes, the hardest lesson I learned about true leadership is that it's not about power, prestige, or recognition. It's about responsibility, trust, humility, and service. It's about understanding that your greatest legacy as a leader will not be what you built, but who you built. Leadership is not about standing above others. It's about standing beside them, walking with them through the storm, and showing them that even in the darkest moments, there's always a light to follow. Because in the end, true leadership isn't about you. It's about the people who believed in you, trusted you, and became better because of you. And when you can say that you've helped someone rise higher, even if no one else ever knows, that's when you know you've truly led. When I first took on the role of a leader, I believed I understood what leadership was all about. I thought it was about confidence, control, and charisma. I assumed that if I spoke with authority and made decisions with certainty, people would naturally follow. I thought leadership meant having all the answers and always being the strongest person in the room. But over time, I discovered how wrong I was. The hardest lesson I learned about true leadership is that it's not about being in charge. It's about being responsible for those in your charge. Leadership is not about power or position. It's about service, sacrifice, and the willingness to stand up for others even when it's inconvenient. In the early days of my leadership journey, I made a common mistake. I believed that to lead effectively, I had to project strength at all times. I couldn't show weakness. I couldn't admit uncertainty. I thought vulnerability was a flaw that would make others doubt me. So I kept my guard up. I tried to have all the solutions, make every decision, and control every outcome. On the surface, everything looked fine. The team respected me, or so I thought. They met deadlines, followed directions, and rarely challenged my ideas. But deep down, I could feel something was off. The room felt tense. Conversations were short. People did what I asked, but they didn't do more than that. There was no spark, no enthusiasm, no creativity. They weren't engaged, they were just complying. One day, during a particularly stressful project, things started falling apart. Mistakes were piling up, deadlines were slipping, and morale was at an all-time low. I was frustrated and tired. Instead of stepping back to understand what was happening, I pushed harder. I demanded more effort, more focus, more discipline. I thought pressure would bring results. Instead, it only brought silence. And in that silence, I realized something crucial: people can follow your commands, but that doesn't mean they believe in you. Then one of my team members, a quiet but reliable person, approached me after a long day. He said something I'll never forget. "We're not afraid of failing. We're afraid of disappointing you." Those words stopped me cold. In that moment, I realized I had become the kind of leader I never wanted to be, the kind who made people afraid to fail instead of inspired to try. I had mistaken authority for trust and compliance for commitment. That night, I went home and thought deeply about what kind of leader I truly wanted to be. And that reflection changed everything for me. From that point on, I started to redefine leadership for myself. I stopped seeing it as a performance and started seeing it as a responsibility. I learned that the true role of a leader is not to appear strong, but to make others feel strong. It's not to have all the answers, but to create an environment where everyone feels safe enough to contribute their ideas. Leadership isn't about being right. It's about doing what's right for the people who depend on you. I began to listen more and speak less. I started asking questions instead of giving commands. I made it clear that it was okay to make mistakes, because mistakes meant we were trying, learning, and growing. Slowly, the energy of the team began to shift. People started sharing ideas more openly. They began taking initiative without waiting for approval. They began to trust not only me, but each other. And that's when I learned one of the most important truths about leadership: trust is not given, it's earned. It's earned through consistency, honesty, and empathy. It's earned through small moments, like showing up when you say you will, listening when it's inconvenient, and standing by your team when things go wrong. I used to think leadership was about proving how capable I was, but I realized true leadership is about proving to your people how capable they are. It's about believing in them so deeply that they start believing in themselves. When people feel trusted, they stop fearing failure and start striving for excellence. They stop working for you and start working with you. They start taking ownership of their purpose, and that's when magic happens. There's a misconception that leadership is about strength, authority, and control. But real leadership is about humility, patience, and service. It's not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about surrounding yourself with people who are smarter than you and creating a space where they can thrive. It's about lifting others higher, even if it means standing in the background while they shine. When your people succeed, that's when you succeed as a leader. Leadership also means carrying burdens that others never see. It means taking responsibility for mistakes you didn't make and giving credit for achievements you didn't personally accomplish. It means staying calm when everyone else is panicking, showing optimism when everyone else is losing hope, and believing in the team when they're struggling to believe in themselves. It means standing at the front when there's danger and stepping back when there's praise. And perhaps most importantly, it means caring deeply, even when it hurts. The hardest part of leadership is not the long hours, the pressure, or the accountability. The hardest part is putting others before yourself every single time. It's sacrificing your comfort, your ego, and sometimes even your recognition for the sake of your people. It's being the person others can rely on, even when you're exhausted. It's being patient when progress is slow and forgiving when mistakes are made. It's choosing to see potential in people when they can't see it in themselves. There was another moment in my journey that tested this lesson. Our team had failed to deliver on an important project. I could see the disappointment on everyone's faces. They expected criticism, maybe even punishment. But instead, I took the blame. I stood in front of the executives and said, "The responsibility is mine." My team did their best, but I failed to support them properly. After that meeting, I expected frustration from my team. Instead, they came together with renewed energy and commitment. They didn't feel defeated. They felt trusted. That experience taught me that the strength of a leader is not shown by avoiding failure, but by how they respond to it. Leadership is not about perfection. It's about authenticity. People don't want a flawless leader. They want a real one. They want someone who admits when they're wrong, who listens when they're confused, and who cares even when it's difficult. When you show people that you're human, you give them permission to be human too. You create an environment where honesty replaces fear and collaboration replaces competition. Over time, I came to understand that leadership is not a destination. It's a journey of self-awareness, humility, and growth. You never truly arrive. You just keep learning, adjusting, and striving to be better for the people who depend on you. Every day, you face choices. Do you lead with ego or empathy? Do you seek credit or give it away? Do you chase success or build significance? These decisions define not just what kind of leader you are, but what kind of impact you'll leave behind. True leadership is rarely comfortable. It's not glamorous or easy. It requires patience when progress is invisible, courage when outcomes are uncertain, and faith when the path ahead is unclear. It demands that you care deeply about people, even when they make mistakes, even when they challenge you, even when it would be easier to give up. But it's worth it. Because there's no greater feeling than watching someone grow, improve, and believe in themselves because you chose to lead them with compassion instead of control. The hardest lesson I learned about true leadership is that it's not about you, it's about them. It's about the people who trust you to guide them, support them, and believe in them. It's about serving something bigger than yourself and being willing to do it quietly without the need for applause. True leadership isn't measured by how many people follow you, but by how many people grow because of you. And when you can look back and see that your leadership helped others become stronger, wiser, and more confident, that's when you know you've done it right. Because in the end, leadership is not a title, a position, or a privilege. It's a responsibility, a daily commitment to put others first, to guide with humility, and to lead with heart. And once you learn that lesson, you never forget it. It becomes part of who you are, shaping every word you speak and every action you take. That's what true leadership really is, not about standing above others, but about standing beside them and helping them see how powerful they already are. When I first found myself in a position of leadership, I thought it was the ultimate sign of success. I believed being a leader meant having authority, being the one who made decisions, and having people look to you for direction. I thought leadership was about confidence, charisma, and control. But over the years, I learned that real leadership is far from that image. The hardest lesson I learned about true leadership is that it's not about power, titles, or being in charge. It's about responsibility, trust, and service. It's about putting others before yourself, even when it's uncomfortable, and doing what's right even when it costs you. When I started leading my first team, I was full of energy and ambition. I wanted to make an impact, to prove that I could handle responsibility. But in my eagerness to lead, I misunderstood what leadership really meant. I thought it was about giving clear instructions, making firm decisions, and keeping everything under control. I thought people would follow me because I was confident and decisive. And at first, things seemed fine. My team followed my lead, met deadlines, and did their work. But slowly, I began to notice something strange. There was no passion, no spark, no connection. People followed, but not because they believed in me. They followed because they had to. They were doing their jobs, but their hearts weren't in it. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was leading through authority, not trust. I was focused on results, not relationships. And when you do that, people may perform, but they won't commit. They may obey, but they won't believe. It took a difficult experience to open my eyes to that truth. There was a project we were working on that required long hours, late nights, and constant problem solving. The pressure was intense. I was determined to deliver on time and keep everything on track. So I began micromanaging. I checked on every detail, reviewed everyone's work, and made all the major decisions myself. I told myself I was helping, but deep down, I was afraid of losing control. I thought leadership meant keeping everything in my hands, but what I was really doing was suffocating my team's confidence. One evening, after another exhausting day, one of my team members asked if we could talk. He was quiet, usually the kind of person who didn't say much. He looked nervous but sincere. He said, "We're not afraid of making mistakes. We're afraid of disappointing you." Those words changed everything for me. They broke something open inside me. In that moment, I realized I had created fear where there should have been trust. I had made my team worry more about my approval than about doing great work. I thought I was leading them, but I was really holding them back. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what he said. It made me question everything I believed about leadership. I began to see that true leadership is not about control. It's about empowerment. It's not about demanding respect. It's about earning it. It's not about being the best. It's about bringing out the best in others. That realization was the hardest and most humbling lesson I ever learned. From that point forward, I changed the way I led. I began to focus less on giving answers and more on asking questions. I stopped pretending to know everything. I learned to listen, really listen to my team. I made it clear that failure was not something to fear, but something to learn from. I started celebrating effort, not just results. And slowly, something began to shift. People started speaking up more. They took ownership of their work. They started bringing new ideas and challenging me when they disagreed. And for the first time, I felt what real leadership feels like, not control, but connection. I realized that leadership isn't about standing above others. It's about standing beside them. It's about creating a space where people feel safe enough to take risks, to experiment, and to grow. It's about believing in people even when they don't believe in themselves. And that belief is powerful. It changes everything. Because when people know you trust them, they start to trust themselves. They begin to act with confidence, take initiative, and strive for excellence. Not because they have to, but because they want to. Another thing I learned is that true leadership is built on consistency. People don't follow leaders because of what they say, they follow because of what they do. Every word, every action, every decision either builds trust or breaks it. Leadership isn't a single act of inspiration. It's a long, steady process of earning respect. It's showing up again and again, especially when it's hard. It's standing up for your team when things go wrong and standing back when things go right. It's putting others' needs ahead of your own, even when no one's watching. One of the hardest parts of leadership is learning to take responsibility for everything that happens under your guidance. It's easy to take credit when things go well, but true leadership means taking the blame when they don't. I remember once when our team failed to meet a major goal. It would have been easy to blame circumstances or individuals, but instead I owned it. I stood in front of everyone and said, "This one's on me." That moment taught me something powerful. Leaders don't lose credibility by admitting fault, they gain it. Because when you take responsibility, you show your team that you value integrity more than image. And that builds trust in a way no speech or strategy ever can. As time went on, I also learned that leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. People don't need their leaders to be flawless. They need them to be human. They need someone who listens, who understands, who admits mistakes, and who cares. Vulnerability, I realized, isn't a weakness. It's a bridge. When you open up about your own struggles, you give others permission to do the same. You create an environment where honesty replaces fear and collaboration replaces competition. The more I led, the more I realized that leadership is not a one-time act. It's a daily choice. Every day, you must choose humility over ego, empathy over authority, and purpose over pride. It's a commitment to show up with patience when others are frustrated, to show grace when others fall short, and to stay steady when others lose faith. Leadership isn't about being the loudest in the room. It's about listening to the quiet voices that others overlook. It's about seeing potential in people before they see it in themselves and helping them grow into it. There's also a deeper truth I discovered: leadership is lonely. Not because you're surrounded by fewer people, but because you carry the weight of their well-being on your shoulders. You think about them constantly, their challenges, their fears, their growth. You sacrifice your comfort so they can have clarity. You take the hard hits so they can stay protected. And though it can be exhausting, it's also the most fulfilling feeling in the world. Because when you see someone you've led succeed, when you watch them grow stronger, braver, and more confident, that's the real reward of leadership. I used to think leadership was about results. Now I know it's about people. It's about leaving those you lead better than you found them. It's about being the kind of person others can depend on, especially when everything feels uncertain. It's about building trust so deeply that even when you're not in the room, your influence still guides them. The hardest lesson I learned about true leadership is that it's not about recognition. It's about responsibility. It's about being willing to do the right thing, even when it's invisible. It's about lifting others higher, even if that means you stay unseen. Because real leaders don't measure success by how high they climb, but by how many people they bring with them. When I look back now, I realize leadership isn't a role you step into. It's a mindset you live by. It's not about being in front. It's about being behind, supporting, guiding, and empowering others to move forward. And maybe the most important truth of all is that leadership never ends. It's not something you master. It's something you grow into every day. Every conversation, every challenge, every mistake is another opportunity to lead better, to serve deeper, and to care more. That's the hardest lesson I learned about true leadership. It's not about control or command, but about care. It's about showing up for people, believing in them, and helping them believe in themselves. Because in the end, leadership isn't about being the best. It's about helping others become their best. And when you can do that, you don't just lead, you leave a legacy. When I first stepped into a leadership role, I thought I understood what it meant to lead. I imagined that leadership was about being in control, giving direction, and inspiring others with confidence and vision. I thought people followed leaders because they admired their strength, their certainty, and their success. But as time went on, I discovered that real leadership is not about being the most confident person in the room. It's not about being admired or feared. The hardest lesson I learned about true leadership is that it has nothing to do with authority and everything to do with responsibility. It's not about being served, it's about serving others. It's not about standing above people, it's about standing beside them even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs you something. In the beginning, I was focused on performance and results. I wanted everything to run smoothly. I wanted to meet every deadline, achieve every goal, and keep the team productive. I thought that was my job as a leader, to make sure things got done efficiently. But slowly, I started to notice that people weren't engaged. They did their work, but it lacked energy. They met targets, but not with enthusiasm. There was no spark of passion or creativity. I was leading a team that was functioning, but not thriving. And at first, I couldn't understand why. I thought maybe they needed more motivation, maybe I wasn't pushing hard enough, or maybe I needed to be stricter. But the more pressure I applied, the more distant they became. That was the beginning of my greatest lesson. One day, after a particularly stressful week filled with tension and long hours, one of my team members approached me. He was one of the most reliable people on the team, always quiet and focused. He looked tired but determined to say what was on his mind. He said, "We're not afraid of failing. We're afraid of disappointing you." I can still remember those words clearly because they hit me harder than any mistake or missed deadline ever could. In that moment, I realized I had created an environment of fear instead of trust. I thought I was leading with strength, but I was leading with pressure. I thought I was helping my team by being demanding, but I was suffocating them with expectations. I thought I was being responsible, but I was being controlling. That realization changed the way I saw leadership forever. I went home that night and replayed those words in my head. It made me question everything I believed about leadership. I started to understand that people don't follow leaders because they're perfect or powerful. They follow leaders who make them feel safe, valued, and capable. They follow leaders who give them space to make mistakes and the confidence to recover from them. Leadership isn't about removing fear. It's about replacing it with trust. It's about building a culture where people feel supported, not judged, where they can bring their full selves to the table, knowing that even if they fall, someone will help them stand again. That experience forced me to look inward. I realized that my desire to control everything came from my own insecurity. I was afraid of failing as a leader, and that fear made me tighten my grip on the team. But leadership is not about control, it's about connection. The more you try to control people, the less they trust you. The more you connect with them, the more they give you their best. I learned that true leadership starts with empathy. It starts with understanding what people need, not just what you want from them. It's about being curious enough to ask, how can I help you succeed? Instead of, why didn't you meet the target? As I changed my approach, everything began to shift. I started listening more and talking less. I asked for feedback instead of assuming I knew best. I began to give people autonomy and ownership of their work. I stopped being the loudest voice in the room and became the one who listened the most. I discovered that leadership is not about having all the answers. It's about creating a space where others can find them. When people feel heard, they stop being afraid. When they feel trusted, they stop holding back. And when they feel supported, they begin to grow into their full potential. Leadership also taught me something about humility. True leadership is not about proving you're the smartest or the most capable person in the room. It's about being humble enough to admit when you're wrong and to learn from others and to give credit where it's due. It's about realizing that the success of your team is your success, but their failures are your responsibility. I learned that leadership requires courage, the courage to take the blame when things go wrong and to give away the praise when things go right. It's about showing up for people, even when they disappoint you, and believing in them even when they've lost faith in themselves. There was a time when our team failed to meet an important goal. The disappointment was heavy. Everyone was frustrated and demoralized. It would have been easy to look for excuses or point fingers, but I didn't. Instead, I took responsibility. I told the team that the failure was mine. I hadn't supported them enough, hadn't communicated clearly enough, hadn't led effectively enough. I expected anger or embarrassment, but what I saw instead was relief. In that moment, the tension lifted. People stopped being defensive and started being honest. They started offering ideas, admitting mistakes, and focusing on solutions. That day, I learned something powerful. When a leader takes responsibility, they create a culture of accountability without blame. People don't fear mistakes, they learn from them. And that's how a team grows stronger. Over time, I realized that leadership is not about being right. It's about doing what's right. Sometimes that means making hard choices, even unpopular ones. It means standing by your values, even when others disagree. It means putting people over profits, integrity over convenience, and compassion over ego. Leadership is about doing what serves the long-term good, not just what looks good in the short term. And that's not always easy. It requires patience, self-awareness, and the willingness to take the harder path when it's the right one. I also learned that leadership is not a destination. It's a lifelong journey. You never truly arrive at being a perfect leader. Every day tests your patience, your values, and your ability to serve others. Every challenge teaches you something new about yourself and about the people you lead. Leadership will humble you. It will reveal your flaws, test your character, and push you beyond your limits. But it will also give you purpose. It will give you moments of deep fulfillment. Moments when you see someone you've guided rise higher, achieve more, and believe in themselves in ways they never did before. Those are the moments that remind you why you lead. One of the most profound lessons I learned is that leadership is not about how many people follow you. It's about how many people you help grow. It's about leaving people better than you found them. It's about building trust so deeply that your presence inspires confidence and your absence doesn't create fear. It's about creating more leaders, not more followers. Because the real measure of leadership is not how much power you have, but how much power you give away. As I continued to grow as a leader, I began to see that leadership is, at its core, an act of love. It's about caring enough to challenge people, to push them beyond what they think they're capable of, and to stand by them when they stumble. It's about showing compassion, not just in words, but in actions. It's about listening without judgment, leading with empathy, and putting the success of your people before your own ambitions. The hardest lesson I learned about true leadership is that it's not about you. It's about them. The people who trust you, who depend on you, who look to you for guidance and courage. It's about the responsibility you carry to serve, protect, and uplift them. Leadership is not the reward for success. It's the price you pay for responsibility. It's not something you earn. It's something you live every day. And when you finally understand that, leadership stops being a role and becomes a way of life. You start leading not just at work, but everywhere. In your family, your friendships, and your community. You begin to realize that real leadership isn't about changing people. It's about creating an environment where they can change themselves. And when you do that, when you help others become their best selves, you realize that leadership isn't about control or command. It's about care, trust, and courage. It's about the quiet strength of standing beside others, not above them. And that, more than anything else, is the hardest and most beautiful lesson of all. At the end of it all, I've come to see that leadership is not about titles, applause, or control. It's about impact. It's about how you make people feel, how you lift them when they doubt themselves, and how you stand with them when things get hard. True leadership doesn't demand respect. It earns it through consistency, empathy, and courage. The hardest lesson I learned about leadership is that it's not about being perfect. It's about being present. Because in the end, people won't remember the goals you hit or the plans you made. They'll remember how you made them feel safe enough to grow. And that right there is the essence of real leadership.